Nobody was watching. That is the part of this story that will haunt every talent scout, every tennis commentator, every casual fan who scrolled past Alex Eala's name on a WTA draw sheet before March 2025 and thought nothing of it. A teenager from the Philippines, ranked 140th in the world, carrying nothing but a wild card into the Miami Open, was about to rearrange the entire conversation about who belongs at the top of women's tennis. And now, as the 20-year-old steps onto indoor clay at the Upper Austria Ladies Linz this week, seeded 7th and surrounded by Grand Slam champions, the question is no longer whether Alex Eala can compete with the best. The question is whether anyone in Linz can stop her from proving she already is. Let's rewind, because the trajectory that brought Eala to this moment in Austria is unlike anything we have seen in modern tennis. Born in Manila on May 23, 2005, Alexandra Eala grew up in a country with zero professional tennis infrastructure to speak of. The Philippines has never produced a top 30 WTA player. It has never produced a Grand Slam singles champion, male or female. The sporting culture revolves around basketball, boxing, and, more recently, weightlifting. Tennis barely registers. And yet, at the age of 13, Eala's family made one of those terrifying, irreversible decisions that separate dreamers from the people who actually chase the dream. They sent their daughter to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She was a child, thousands of miles from home, surrounded by languages she did not speak, dropped into a system designed to break you before it builds you back. The Nadal Academy is not a finishing school. It is a crucible. The philosophy there mirrors Nadal's own playing identity: grind, suffer, outlast, and find beauty inside the pain. Young players train on clay for hours, develop footwork patterns that most hard-court players never bother with, and build the kind of physical and mental resilience that can only come from years of disciplined repetition. Eala absorbed all of it. She absorbed the Spanish clay court mentality, the tactical patience, the understanding that a rally is not something to escape, but something to dominate. She graduated from the academy in June 2023, receiving her diploma from Nadal himself. By then, she had already won the 2022 US Open Girls Singles title, becoming the first Filipino player in history to capture a junior Grand Slam singles championship. She had also won the 2021 French Open Girls Doubles. On paper, she was a prodigy. In reality, she was still invisible to the wider tennis world. The transition from juniors to the professional tour is where most prodigies quietly disappear. The athleticism gap is enormous, the tactical demands multiply exponentially, and the mental toll of losing week after week, while ranked outside the top 200, can break even the most resilient spirit. Eala's professional climb was steady, but unremarkable through 2023 and 2024. She hovered around the edges of the top 150, picking up wins on the ITF circuit and at WTA 125 events. She won her first WTA 125 singles title in Guadalajara, which pushed her ranking to number 61 and gave her a sliver of visibility. But she was still, by any mainstream measure, an unknown quantity. No one outside the Filipino fanbase and a few hardcore tennis insiders had her on their radar. Then came Miami. The 2025 Miami Open is where the Alex Eala mythology begins in earnest. Handed a wild card as the world number 140, she entered the draw with nothing to lose and no expectations to manage. Her first match was solid. Her second match was impressive. But it was the third round where things started to get genuinely absurd. She took out Jelena Ostapenko, the 2017 French Open champion, in straight sets. Then she dismantled Madison Keys, the number 5 seed and the reigning Australian Open champion at the time, 6-4, 6-2. The tennis world paused. This was not a fluke. This was not a bad day for the favorites. This was a pattern, and the pattern had a name. In the quarterfinals, she drew Iga Świątek, world number 2, 5-time Grand Slam champion, the most dominant clay court player of her generation, and a formidable hard-court force besides. Swiatek had won 4 French Opens, had a winning streak of 37 consecutive matches on her resume, and had spent extensive time at the pinnacle of the WTA rankings. She was supposed to end the fairy tale. She was supposed to be the wall that the wild card could not break through. Eala beat her 6-2, 7-5. Not in a tiebreak thriller decided by a net cord on match point. Not in some miraculous three-set escape. She beat her in straight sets, controlling the tempo from the baseline, redirecting Swiatek's heavy topspin with an ease that bordered on disrespectful. The match was, tactically, a masterclass in using pace against a player who relies on generating pace. Eala absorbed the ball on her backhand side, flattened it out on her forehand, and moved Swiatek around the court with angles that the pole simply could not track. It was the biggest upset of the tournament and arguably the most significant result in Philippine sporting history. The semi-final, against Jessica Pegula, was a different story. Pegula won 7-6, 5-7, 6-3 in a grueling three-setter that saw Eala fight off multiple match points before finally succumbing to fatigue and the accumulated physical toll of a week in which she had played far more tennis than her body was accustomed to at that level. She lost, but the damage to the old narrative was already done. Alex Eala was no longer a curiosity. She was a contender. What followed was a 2025 season that confirmed the Miami run was not an anomaly. She reached her first WTA Tour final at the Eastbourne Open, becoming the first Filipino woman to ever compete for a WTA title. The final itself was heartbreaking. She lost to Australia's Maya Joint in a third-set tiebreak, 4-6, 6-1, 6-7, saving 4 championship points before finally falling at 10-12 in the breaker. She also faced Swiatek again at the Madrid Open, losing in 3 sets in the round of 64 after taking the first set. The pattern was clear. Eala could hang with anyone, and on her best day, she could beat anyone. The ranking reflected it. She climbed steadily through the latter half of 2025, finishing the year at number 53 with a 40-26 win-loss record. And then 2026 arrived, and the climb accelerated. The Australian swing gave her a semi-final in Auckland at the ASB Classic. The Australian Open was a disappointment, a first-round exit, but Eala responded the way elite competitors respond. She went to the Middle East and raised her level. At the Abu Dhabi Open, she reached the quarterfinals before losing to Ekaterina Alexandrova, who would go on to dominate that stretch of the calendar. Then came Dubai, a WTA 1000 event with the deepest field outside the Grand Slams. Eala carved her way to the quarterfinals again, this time running headfirst into Coco Gauff. The result was lopsided, 6-0, 6-2, and it exposed a gap that still exists between Eala and the very top echelon. Gauff was clinical, taking Eala's time away at every opportunity, stepping inside the baseline to crush returns and never allowing the rallies to develop into the kind of extended exchanges where Eala thrives. It was a reality check. But even reality checks carry information, and the information Eala took away from that match was specific. Against the very best, she needs to dictate from the first ball, not the third. The Sunshine Double in the United States brought more data. At Indian Wells, she won her opening match against Diana Yastremska in a thrilling three-setter, 7-5, 4-6, 7-5, before falling to Linda Noskova in the round of 16. The Indian Wells result pushed her ranking to a career high of number 29, making her the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA Tour history and the first to break into the top 30. Then at Miami, defending the points from her magical 2025 run, she reached the round of 16 again before Karolina Muchova ended her campaign 6-0, 6-2. The drop from 29 to 45 in the ranking stung, but the body of work across the first quarter of 2026 told a more optimistic story. 14 wins against 8 losses, nearly $500,000 in prize money, and a consistency at the WTA 1000 level that very few players her age can match. Which brings us to Linz. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz starts tomorrow, April 6th, and runs through April 12th. It is a WTA 500 event, which means it sits in the middle tier of the tour calendar, above the 250s, but below the 1000s and Grand Slams. This year, however, the tournament has undergone a significant transformation. For the first time in its 35-year history, the Linz Open is being played on indoor clay courts, a shift from the hard courts that previously defined the event. This surface change is enormous from a tactical standpoint. Indoor clay plays differently from outdoor clay. The ball stays lower, the bounce is more predictable, and the conditions reward players who can generate heavy topspin while also possessing the ability to flatten out their shots when the geometry of the rally demands it. The absence of wind and weather variables means that serve placement becomes more precise, return positioning becomes more critical, and the margins between winning and losing tighten considerably. For Eala, this surface could be an extraordinary fit. Her years at the Nadal Academy were spent on clay. Her footwork, her sliding technique, her ability to absorb heavy balls and redirect them with disguise, all of these attributes were forged on the red dirt of Mallorca. She has just completed a training block at the Nadal Academy in preparation for the clay season, working with the coaching team that has guided her development since childhood. The timing of Linz, as the first European clay event of the season, gives Eala a chance to establish rhythm and confidence on her best surface before the bigger tests at Stuttgart and Madrid that follow in the weeks ahead. The field in Linz, though, is no cakewalk. Defending champion Ekaterina Alexandrova is the top seed and has built a reputation as one of the most dangerous indoor players on the WTA Tour. Her serve is a weapon, her forehand carries immense velocity, and her record in indoor events over the past 3 years is among the best in the game. Clara Tauson, the second seed, is a ball-striking prodigy from Denmark who can overpower opponents from the baseline when her timing is right, though she comes in with inconsistent form, having won just a single match in her last 4 appearances. Ludmila Samsonova, seeded third, has an even more concerning run of form, winless in her recent outings, but her talent ceiling remains extraordinarily high. Jelena Ostapenko, the 4th seed and 2017 French Open champion, is the kind of opponent who can beat anyone on any given day, particularly indoors, where her aggressive shot-making becomes even more devastating. Emma Navarro provides a different kind of challenge. The American is a tenacious competitor who excels in extended rallies and brings an intensity to her matches that can overwhelm players who do not match her energy from the opening game. Emma Raducanu, the 2021 U.S. Open champion, is also in the field, though her form has been hampered by illness in recent weeks. And then there are the former Grand Slam champions lurking further down the draw, Barbora Krejčíková, who won Wimbledon in 2024 and the French Open in 2021, and Marketa Vondrousova, the 2023 Wimbledon champion. For Grand Slam winners in a 28-player draw, that is an absurd concentration of talent for a WTA 500 event. Eala enters as an unseeded player, which means she could face any of the top seeds in the early rounds. The official draw drops today, Easter Sunday, and the speculation among Filipino fans and tennis analysts alike has been intense. A potential first-round matchup against someone like Ostapenko or Krejčíková would be a baptism by fire on the European clay. But Eala has shown repeatedly that she performs best when she is the underdog, when the crowd is either against her or indifferent, and when the tactical challenge is so severe that she has no choice but to elevate her game to its absolute ceiling. There is a specific tactical dimension to Eala's game that deserves closer examination, because it explains why she has been able to produce results against players ranked far above her. She is a left-handed player, which immediately gives her a structural advantage in terms of serve angles and rally construction. Her forehand, delivered from the left side, naturally curves into the backhand of right-handed opponents, creating an asymmetry that many players find deeply uncomfortable. Her backhand, on the other hand, travels cross-court into the forehand of right-handers, but does so with a flatter trajectory and more penetrating pace than most lefties can generate. The combination of these two strokes allows her to construct points from angles that are simply unavailable to right-handed baseliners. But what truly separates Eala from other talented young players is her ability to absorb pace and redirect it. Against players like Swiatek and Gauff, who generate enormous racket head speed and heavy topspin, the instinct for most opponents is to retreat behind the baseline and try to neutralize the ball. Eala does the opposite. She takes the ball early, often on the rise, and uses her opponent's pace against them. This is not a strategy you can teach overnight. It requires thousands of hours of practice, an innate sense of timing, and the kind of hand speed that is partially a gift of natural talent. She developed this skill on the clay courts of Mallorca, where the ball sits up just enough after bouncing to allow a player with good footwork and quick hands to step in and take time away from the opponent. On indoor clay, where the bounce is even more predictable, this ability could become devastating. Eala's serve remains the most obvious weakness in her game. She does not generate the raw power that players like Alexandrova or Samsonova can produce, and her first serve percentage has been inconsistent throughout the 2026 season. Against top opponents, a weak service game can be the difference between holding serve comfortably and constantly having to fight through deuce points. At Linz, against a field that includes several elite returners, Eala will need to find greater consistency on her first delivery and develop more variety on her second serve to avoid being pinned on the defensive from the start of each service game. The mental dimension is where Eala may have the greatest edge over her competitors in Linz. She has, in the span of 12 months, gone from anonymity to playing quarterfinals at WTA 1000 events against the best players in the world. She has experienced the highest highs, beating Swiatek in front of a roaring crowd in Miami, and the lowest lows, being demolished 6-0, 6-2 by Gauff in Dubai. She has played a WTA final and held championship points before losing in a heartbreaking tiebreak. That emotional range, that depth of competitive experience compressed into such a short period, has given her a resilience that most 20-year-olds simply do not possess. She has already failed at the highest level and survived. There is nothing that Linz can throw at her that she has not already faced. The Filipino fanbase, meanwhile, has turned Eala into something more than just a tennis player. She is a symbol of what is possible when a small country decides to believe in one of its own. The support she receives at tournaments is extraordinary, with Filipino fans traveling from across the globe to watch her play, creating an atmosphere more typically associated with team sports than with individual tennis matches. At Indian Wells, the Eala section of the stands was a wall of Philippine flags and coordinated chants. In Dubai, the pro-Eala crowd was so vocal that Coco Gauff later commented that she had to channel the energy of the crowd rather than fight against it. This kind of passionate support base is rare in women's tennis, and it gives Eala a psychological tailwind that her opponents simply cannot replicate. As she steps onto the indoor clay in Linz this week, Eala carries all of this with her. The years in Mallorca, the wild card in Miami, the upset of Swiatek, the heartbreak of Eastbourne, the climb to number 29, the drop back to 45, the loss to Gauff, the training block on the familiar red dirt of the Nadal Academy, the knowledge that Stuttgart and Madrid and, eventually, the French Open are all waiting in the weeks ahead. This is not just a tournament for Alex Eala. This is the opening statement of her clay court season, the surface where her game was built, the surface where she learned to fight, and the surface where she might finally announce to the world what a few 100,000 Filipino fans already know, that she belongs at the very top of this sport. The draw will be revealed in a matter of hours. The first ball will be struck tomorrow. Somewhere in the Design Center Linz, on a surface she has known since she was 13 years old, Alex Eala will walk onto court, adjust her strings, bounce the ball twice, and begin the next chapter of the most remarkable story in Philippine sporting history. Whether she wins or loses this week matters less than what she represents. The proof that greatness does not require a tennis tradition, does not require a federation with unlimited resources, and does not require the approval of anyone who was not paying attention when the story first began. All it requires is one person willing to leave home at 13, train in a language she did not speak, and keep swinging until the rest of the world had no choice but to look.